All right. Welcome everyone to another Kanji Demo Day. These are a series of live events that we do to highlight certain aspects and features of kanji. If you're looking to catch up on our previous demo days, you can find them on our YouTube channel. So if you want to catch up on anything we've done before, use this link and hop on over there. And of course, we'll share this later on in the chat as well. Today's demo day will be going over Kandji Passport and how it can help teams streamline the end user onboarding experience and reduce password related issues. I'm Jim Quilty, a solutions engineer here at Kandji, and I'm joined today by my colleague Maz Kahale, who will be helping answer questions. Feel free to ask those questions in the questions section of the webinar, and we'll answer them either live in the chat or during our Q&A section. With that, let's get started. All right. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to go over today. First, we're going to talk about what Passport is and what it does. Next, we'll cover some of the benefits of using Passport. Then we'll take a look at Passport in action and go over how to configure the library item. Last, I'll touch on Apple's platform SSO and how that compares to Passport. So, what is Kandji Passport? Passport allows users to sign into their Mac computers using identity provider credentials. It's a native part of the Kandji agent that you configure via a library item. It replaces the default macOS login window and synchronizes the identity provider password with the local account. Several leading identity providers are supported natively, including Okta, Entra ID, OneLogin, and Google Workspace. It works with both new computers going through automated device enrollment and already set up computers that have existing accounts on them. Now that we know what Passport is, why would you want to use it? Let's talk about some of the benefits. Passport can streamline the user login experience, allowing them to use credentials they already know for logging into the computer. This reduces the total number of passwords users have to create and remember, which helps reduce password-related IT tickets. There are also options in Passport that can increase security or align with strict compliance requirements like multi-factor authentication at login, or even forcing authentication through the identity provider and disallowing local login entirely. Overall, Kandji Passport helps reduce friction for both users and IT administrators. It simplifies provisioning and login by creating user accounts automatically at first login or merging with an existing account if one already exists. This makes the onboarding process faster and smoother, especially in remote or even shared device environments. Credential resets can happen without IT involvement, and Passport makes sure the local computer password stays in sync. All of this is managed entirely through the Kandji web app, making it easier to deploy and scale across organizations. All right, I think it's time to take a look at Passport in action. We'll take a look at the different ways users can log in with Passport, how they can update their own credentials, and then how to configure the Passport library item itself. Let's start with using Passport to provision an account for a user out of the box. The first step is to get the device enrolled in Kandji. This computer is eligible for automated device enrollment, so we're going to go through that process. When Passport is part of a blueprint, the Kandji agent will be installed right away and take over the authentication mechanism of the computer. We'll be skipping most of the items as part of automated device enrollment, including account setup. The only item that we're not going to skip is the location services, so that we know where the computer is in the world. After enrollment, the user is dropped directly to the Passport login window. Here, we'll enter our identity provider credentials and log in. Passport is validating the info we've entered in the background and checking if there's already a user account on the system. Since this is a new setup, Passport will provision a new account for the user using the username and password from the identity provider. Everything was successful, so we're dropped directly to the desktop and we're ready to go. If you were using something like Kandji Liftoff, that would obviously take over and the user's computer would be configured. But what if we don't want to create a new account? What if we are deploying Passport to an existing fleet, say as part of a migration? Users already have existing accounts, and we don't want them to lose any of their settings or information, which is exactly where the account merge feature comes in. Here we have an existing user, and we want them to start using identity provider credentials to log in. Passport has already been deployed to the computer, so all the user has to do is log out or restart to get to the Passport login window. Here, we're using the web view configuration. This shows the identity provider login window instead of the more Mac native username and password fields. The web view supports prompting the user for multi-factor authentication as part of the login flow. Various multi-factor authentication methods are supported, including push notifications, security questions, and one-time codes. Passport can't actually read the password from the web window, though, since it's a secure window. So we're going to ask the user for their password one more time, just to validate it. We've configured Passport specifically for end user setups in this case. Since this is the first time the user is authenticating, we prompt them to merge the identity provider credentials with an existing local account. They select their account and provide their current password. Passport associates the identity provider credentials with the local account and then updates the local password. The last thing I want to show is how end users can actually update their passwords themselves. From the Kandji menu bar, you can select the gear icon, and if you've configured this option in the Passport library item, they can be taken to a password reset URL. Many identity providers support a self-service password reset. You'll have to look at your specific identity provider documentation to see if they support it and how to configure it. For Okta, the user is going to enter their email address. Then they're going to have to provide a second factor to prove their identity. They could have chosen an email, but in this case, we used a push notification through Okta Verify. After validating their identity, the user can update their password. When the user finishes and closes the password reset window, Passport is automatically going to check and do a validation in the background to see if the password has changed. Since it has in this case, the user is going to be prompted to update the local password to the new password they just set with the identity provider. This brings the password back in sync on the local computer. Now that we've seen what Passport looks like for the end user, let's see what it takes to configure it. We'll start, as in most places with Kandji, in the library, and add a new library item. Passport's going to be right at the top in our enrollment configuration section. Hit Add and Configure, and then we'll see the normal library item setup. As always, we have to give the library item a name, and then you can choose whether or not you want to actually add it to any blueprints right now, or you can always come back later and add it as part of your assignment map. In the authentication section, select your identity provider. The native providers that I mentioned earlier are listed here, or you could choose other to set up Passport with additional providers. The identity provider URL and client ID will come from an application you create in your identity provider. Then you just have to choose what login method you want users to use, the native Mac login or the web login experience. User provisioning handles how users log in for the first time. We can set the local account to be either a standard or local administrator, just like with automated device enrollment, or choose to base the account type on identity provider group membership. Account merge settings can be used to configure to either always ask, never ask like we did with our initial setup, or only if a local username matches. We can even force users to merge an existing account. That way we don't accidentally create a fresh one. The access section can be used to add security or streamline the login process. You can prevent login except by an assigned user and restrict direct local authentication, forcing users to authenticate against the identity provider. Allowing FileVault pass-through authentication and securely storing credentials for use in password validation helps simplify things for the end user. Now let's look at customizing the login window. Here you can add your own corporate branding using an additional logo or change the background image. You can also alter other standard login window settings that you'd normally use a configuration profile to do. The username field customization is a great way to indicate to your users what username they need to use to log into the computer. And last is that self-service password reset URL. That way, you can allow users to reset their passwords from the desktop. There's also a nice help window that you can customize. This will just give your users some additional information if they click the little question mark in the bottom left of the Passport login window. You can provide them information to know who to reach out to just in case they are having an additional issue. And you can also show some very specific computer information that can be helpful with the troubleshooting process. Once you save the library item, it will add it to your Kandji blueprint. It will take over the login window the next time the Kandji agent checks in. So that's a quick look at Kandji Passport, both from the user's perspective and the admin setup behind the scenes. Passport is designed to create a seamless, secure login experience that aligns Mac authentication with your identity provider. Setup is straightforward, and the login process is more consistent and secure with fewer password-related tickets. To wrap things up, I can't talk about logging into a Mac computer with identity provider credentials without mentioning Apple's Platform SSO. Platform SSO was initially introduced with macOS Ventura, and while there is some overlap in feature set with Passport, today they fundamentally differ. Platform SSO's primary functionality is to provide SSO authentication for websites and local applications that use modern authentication methods. Passport focuses on the login experience, user provisioning, and password synchronization. What specific features of Platform SSO are available do differ depending on what version of macOS you're running. If you aren't on the latest version, you might not be able to leverage the features you really want, like password synchronization. Kandji Passport offers a consistent experience logging into the computer with identity provider credentials on a wider range of macOS versions. Exactly what features of Platform SSO identity providers support may also vary. Some may require additional SKUs to take advantage of all of the features of Platform SSO. While Apple did announce some very exciting enhancements for Platform SSO in macOS Tahoe this year at the Worldwide Developer Conference, we will have to wait to see what identity providers will fully support them. In the end, it's all about what login method works best for you and your organization and what your identity provider supports. I would definitely be remiss if I didn't highlight the extensive resources Kandji has for configuring and using Passport with supported identity providers. I've got some examples here of support articles that are part of our knowledge base, and we'll make the links available as well in the description when the video is posted. Along with our amazing support team, these articles can get you up and running with Passport in no time at all. And that wraps things up for the presentation portion of our demo day. Hopefully it's given you all some additional info and insight into what Passport can do. Before we move on to Q&A, I do want to share a link to our survey. We'd love to hear your feedback on these demo days presentations, as well as know what other aspects of Kandji do you want to know more about. So use that QR code to take you over to the survey, and please fill that out. It helps us out tremendously. All right, with that, let's move on to some Q&A. Stop my screen share here. And I believe Maz has been manning the Q&A, and we can jump into that.
Yes, thank you, Jim. We have a few questions. I'm going to start with this top one. If using the Passport Mac login, how to suppress the prompt to merge with local user account, as that may be confusing to users for an ADE setup. We would only like to prompt the same local account merge setup for manual device enrollment.
Yeah, that can absolutely be done. So that was in the settings that I showed on the Passport library item for the configuration section and how the provisioning worked. So you can choose whether or not you want to always ask or whether you want to skip that entirely. You can absolutely have multiple Passport library items configured and then use an assignment map to determine if that Passport library item should be applied to automated device enrolling computers or manually enrolling computers. So that's a very easy setup to do. You can use the same app in your identity provider in multiple Passport library items.
Perfect. Thanks, Jim. We have another question here. Can users swap freely between devices? And does one device allow for multiple users to use it freely? I guess based on the demo, it would just keep creating local accounts corresponding to the users.
Yes, that's absolutely right. And you can control that, right? I mentioned that there is the option to lock a login to a specific user. So if you only want the user that you've assigned to the device in Kandji to be able to log into that system, that's a simple checkbox in the Passport configuration. Then only that user or additional local accounts that you specify will be able to access that system. In a shared environment, you could absolutely just let users walk up to the computer, and as long as they can access the OIDC application in your identity provider, they will be able to authenticate and it will create a fresh account. So just keep that in mind if you're working on smaller hard drives or things like that, but it absolutely has been used in lab environments.
Great. Thanks, Jim. We have another one. Can Passport be used to eliminate binding Macs to AD for password sync?
That is a very common use case for Passport. If you're talking about Active Directory, I would assume that you are also leveraging Entra ID, and that is a native supported identity provider with Passport. So you would simply configure that. And then actually, even if you are doing a hybrid environment where you are provisioning users and passwords into Microsoft Entra, you could then use their Active Directory password to log in. The only caveat I'll add there is you would want to make sure that if you want users to update their passwords, you give them the ability to write back to the Active Directory if you're using that self-service reset from Entra directly.
Thanks, Jim. We have one. Does the web login option requirement require network connectivity at first setup and subsequent logins?
It does. Since it is going directly to the identity provider's login page, the device does need to be online. There is a fallback mechanism for local authentication. So in the event that the device is offline, the window would actually switch to that more native Mac login experience with a username and password field. Obviously, if you are preventing users from authenticating except when they are online, then they would not be able to log into the computer. So for web login specifically, yes, the devices do need to be online.
Perfect. Thanks, Jim. We have a few questions around MFA coming in. I'm just going to pop off the first one here. For multi-factor authentication, do you have any customers who disabled their multi-factor specifically for the Kandji Passport usage? And if so, have you seen any issues that may have been caused by that?
No issues with disabling it specifically. You can choose to use it or you can choose not to use it. Even that goes for the web authentication specifically. Multi-factor authentication is only supported with the web version of Passport login. So you may need to disable it if you do want to take advantage of just the Mac login version. But as far as web login goes, it's completely optional. You can choose to use it or you can simply have users go through the first flow.
Perfect. Thank you. And then the second one around multi-factor is, does the supported MFA methods also support smart cards like YubiKey attached to an IDP account?
Unfortunately, we don't support smart cards, and actually, it's not even a kanji limitation. The WebKit window that is available at the macOS login screen, it doesn't have the ability to access USB smart card devices. It only has the ability to use USB devices as a keyboard. So, unfortunately, that's not possible today.
Got it. And there was a question, I answered it in chat, but I'm going to answer it or ask it again because I think it is important. There was a question about the double login. I have to have my users log in on the FileVault window and then the login screen whenever that's configured. Jim, can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. It is typical that we see users have to log in twice, but it is optional. I did mention that there is a FileVault pass-through authentication option available in those access settings in the library item. You can enable FileVault pass-through, which will actually do a background authentication once an account has been merged. Users do have to provide their credentials multiple times during the initial setup, right? So since we don't have a user associated with a Passport account yet, we do prompt them to authenticate and then go through that merge process. Once that's done, though, you can choose whether or not you want to have users authenticate multiple times. Passport is doing a background authentication as long as you're securely storing credentials so that we make sure the password stays in sync. So that if it did change outside of the computer being on, then we would prompt the user to update it at that login window.
Perfect. Thanks, Jim. And then can Kandji Passport be used with other MDMs?
With other MDMs, no. It is built directly into the Kandji agent, so you do have to use Kandji in order to leverage Passport.
Jim is awesome. I agree, Eric. He is. Could we configure Passport for passwordless login?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. And the answer is, if I'm being totally honest, there are ways to leverage purely the push notification to a phone through Microsoft Entra or Okta Verify. But in reality, there always has to be a password on the device, right? That's not anything we control. That's an Apple requirement. The user always has to have a local password. So while you can have it where the user doesn't necessarily have to put in a password at the Passport login window, if you configure it a specific way, they're still going to have to unlock the disk on restart, and they're still going to need to provide that password at certain key places in macOS. Certain places in macOS, Touch ID simply doesn't work. So there are certain scenarios where the user is always going to have to enter a password.
Perfect. And then Anthony had a question around, besides Okta and Entra, what other IDPs are supported? I had started answering the question, but I'll just answer it live. We do support Google Workspace and OneLogin as well natively. And if the IDP supports ROPG over password, we can support that as well, typically. But I would check with your solutions engineer around some of those details. Perfect. We have another one around, would the local account be created as standard or admin, or is that info from the IDP?
All of the above. In that provisioning section, you can determine whether you want users that are created or merged to be set as either a standard account, a local administrator, or you can base it on identity provider groups. So if you only want a specific group within your organization to have local admin rights, Passport can handle that. When you do have that setting for basing it on identity provider groups, we do check every time the user logs in. So if you move a user from one group to another, we can automatically promote or demote them during the login process.
Great. Thanks, Jim. What is the difference between the FileVault and using, say, a different provider for disk encryption? So we could, I think this says disable to FileVault login to make it simpler.
I will be totally honest, I'm not sure. I have only ever used the native Apple FileVault encryption just because it is a much easier thing to manage, and that is manageable by MDM. Third-party tools, I honestly have no idea how they would manage disk encryption there.
Perfect. Thanks, Jim. How does the merge function work in G Suite if the password from G Suite is different? Will it merge login password to Google?
There isn't a write back to the identity provider from Passport. So Passport is making the local account password what the identity provider password is, but we don't necessarily know that inherently. We don't have direct ties into identity providers. So when the user actually enters their password, whether it's at the login window, at that update password screen, that's where Kandji Passport is actually validating against the identity provider. We only know what the last password was, and even then we only know that if you're choosing to store the password securely, which I do recommend. It makes the experience for the end user much smoother. But we never know what the identity provider password is. We do have to validate that during the login process.
Great. This one's an interesting question, Jim. What sort of conflicts would occur if you want to use Passport for login experience and Platform SSO for additional authentication while logged in?
So this is a little bit of an up in the air question right now. I will say this. It is possible to use both in conjunction in certain scenarios. The piece that you don't want to use together is the password synchronization part. Platform SSO, I have configured with Microsoft Entra since they support the secure enclave method for Platform SSO, which basically treats the entire computer's secure enclave as a private key. That handles single sign-on to identity provider applications, right? So if you're logging into a website and using Entra as your authentication method through SAML, Platform SSO can proxy that authentication so that the user only had to log into Microsoft company portal once. Now, if you try to use the password synchronization alongside Passport, then it gets a little hairy simply because they're not aware of each other, right? Passport doesn't know when Platform SSO is updating a password, and vice versa. So if a user does change their password, there can be a lot of confusing prompts because both products think that the password has changed and needs to be updated. So while it's not 100% fully supported at this point, I do see a future where there's a possibility of leveraging Passport for some things and Platform SSO for others.
Perfect. This one should be really quick. Does a user need to re-enter their SSO password after it changes in the IDP?
Yes, that is the window that I showed. Same window would come up after 5 minutes. So in the background, Passport is trying to validate the credentials are still in sync every 5 minutes. So if we get a failure on the identity provider side, that same window that popped up after I updated the password manually through the password reset window, that's the window that the user would see if the password was changed in the identity provider while they're logged in. If they're at the Passport login window and then just log in with the new credentials, we do silently update that in the background if possible.
And then further to the password list question, how does this all integrate with Touch ID, Okta policies around session timeouts, etc.?
So session timeouts don't have any impact on Passport because, like I mentioned, we operate at the login window and then validation in the background. So there's no session, there's no tokens, as far as there's no cookies or anything like that's stored locally. We authenticate at the login window and then we verify the password in the background. Touch ID, totally separate from Passport. So users can still use that at the unlock screen. Touch ID isn't supported at the login window anyway. A user always has to log in with a password at that main login window. That's the same with Passport. But once they're logged in, they can use Touch ID just like they would with a standard local account and password.
Awesome. Thank you, Jim. We have a couple minutes left. I'm going to take 2 questions, and then if we didn't get to your questions, we will get to them and we will respond back in email to you all. But we have users confused if they should use just your short username versus full email as the username to log into their computer. We've had some success using either or. What would be best practice? We use Okta as the IDP.
So some of this is actually covered in one of the support articles that I linked in the resources. So make sure to check that out. And it is a list of compatibility options, both with Kandji itself and macOS when using Passport. In general, there are 2 places where the user might need to enter their actual username and password, right? That's the FileVault unlock screen and the login window. At the Passport login window, I always recommend using the full username, whether it's the UPN, the Okta username, the Google email address. I always recommend the full thing there. Some identity providers do support just the first portion. Okta is in fact one of them, but I know Entra is not, right? Entra and Google Workspace, they only recognize the full email address. So I always recommend using that full username at the Passport login window because that way, okay, it's going against the identity provider, it's validating those credentials, it's not accidentally just doing a local auth only or something like that. So I do recommend that as a best practice. And like I said, check out that support article because it does go through the different settings and recommendations.
Perfect. And then last question, what if we wanted to use Google as our identity provider, but have Google behind Okta Verify?
So not use Okta as I'm going to assume it's not Okta as a single sign-on provider. So you're not sending Google through Okta for authentication, you're just leveraging the Okta Verify application. Today, it would actually not matter. The Google Workspace is a little bit of a unique identity provider. Today, multi-factor authentication is not supported at all with Google Workspace. It's something that we have planned, so I would look out for a support for that in the future. But today, we use Google's secure LDAP service for their authentication, and LDAP doesn't do multi-factor authentication.
Perfect. Thanks, Jim. There is a couple of questions around like roadmap and future. My advice, please check out our blog at kandji.io and then our updates page, updates.kandji.io. We put out all new releases and features between both. That'll be the best place to see those. And then a last question is, would locking the account at the IDP effectively log them out of the device after 5 minutes? There is the option within the Passport setting to where you want them to authenticate each and every time they're unlocking the machine. Otherwise, it's just them unlocking their user account if they're already logged in. Beyond that, it's been a pleasure to be here. Jim, thank you so much for your presentation today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Hope it was good, and we'll see you guys on the next Passport Day, as Jim said. We'll share some links and we'll follow up with questions. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.